On a day when rain fell beneath an impossibly clear sky, a young girl stood at a temple she had once visited as a child with her mother. The memory unfolded softly, as if wrapped in mist. From the eaves of the temple roof hung a delicate fish-shaped wind chime, swaying gently in the breeze. To her young eyes it looked as though the little fish were swimming freely underwater. Nearby stood a large golden Buddha, serene and unmoving, while murals along the walls depicted countless small figures, monks and worshippers rendered in a transitional artistic style that blended devotion and history. The girl tightly held her grandmother's hand as they stood together beneath the sheltering roof. Her grandmother spoke in a calm, knowing voice, telling her that the rain spirit was approaching. The girl gazed upward in awe, whispering that it was amazing. Confusion soon followed, and she asked how rain could possibly fall when the sky was so clear. Her grandmother smiled gently and asked whether she would like to hear an interesting story. Lowering her voice, she said it was a secret, an old tale from long ago. According to the story, there once lived a water god who fell deeply in love with a human woman. The girl listened wide-eyed and asked in disbelief whether a god could truly love a human. Her grandmother nodded, explaining that this was how the legend had always been told. It was said that the strange rain that fell from a clear sky known as fox rain was actually the tears of the water god, shed after losing his beloved wife. Shocked by this revelation, the girl asked if that meant the water god had been left all alone. Feeling a sudden wave of pity, she wondered aloud what became of him. Her grandmother replied softly that people believed he was still waiting, even now, for the reincarnation of his one and only beloved woman. An alarm rang sharply at 6:30 a.m., pulling the girl from her sleep. She reached for her phone and silenced it, murmuring to herself that it had been a long time since she last dreamed of her grandmother. As she tied her hair back into a ponytail, she reflected quietly that her grandmother had passed away when she was still young, leaving her with only vague memories of her face. Yet the dream had felt so vivid, as though it had just happened. In the kitchen, her mother prepared breakfast, frying an egg and chopping vegetables for curry. The television played softly in the background, broadcasting the morning news. The anchor reported that out of 10 lotus seeds excavated in Hamon County in 2009, seeds believed to be over 700 years old, 3 had successfully sprouted and bloomed. Inspired by Hamon's historical identity as Aragaya, the county decided to name the flower Arahongnian. The report continued, mentioning that additional lotus seeds had been discovered in a newly excavated Goguryeo tomb. Scholars speculated that these seeds might have been among those given by Queen Yua to her son Jamung during his escape. As she plated an egg, the mother called out for Junseo to wake his sister. She remarked that if those ancient lotus seeds truly bloomed, people today would be able to witness a Goguryeo lotus that had grown 2,000 years ago. Junseo, still absorbed in his game, eventually made his way to the dining table and shouted for his sister to wake up and eat. Soah emerged from her room and stood near the table, telling her mother that she didn't want rice and preferred bread instead. Her mother firmly refused, saying she needed rice for strength, and teasing that she must have stayed up late again. Soah denied it, and mentioned that she had dreamed about her grandmother. She asked if her mother remembered the temple with the large pond they had visited when she was little. Her mother immediately grew uneasy, telling her not to bring it up. She admitted that Soah had nearly drowned in that pond, and even thinking about it still terrified her. Soah stared in surprise, asking if she had really fallen into the pond. She found it strange that she could remember so clearly the color of the clothes her grandmother had worn that day, yet had no memory of falling into the water. Junseo chimed in, saying he remembered it well and joked that Soah had always seemed unusually lucky or unlucky since she had escaped several dangerous situations without serious injury. His laughter angered their mother, who scolded him for making light of it and sternly warned Soah never to go near water again. Soah quietly agreed, promising to be careful. As the siblings left for school, their mother reminded them to watch for cars, not to be late, and to come home early. After locking the door, she paused, troubled by a strange thought. They had visited that temple long after her own mother had passed away, so how could Soah remember her grandmother being there with them? Far away, at Wuljeongri Beach on Jeju Island, the sun blazed fiercely overhead. A fishing boat floated in the middle of the sea, where 2 boys stood casting their lines. Skin Cap Boy remarked that the sea felt strange that day, too quiet, with not a single fish biting. As they scanned the water, he noticed a dark shadow moving beneath the surface. Suddenly, a violent storm erupted without warning. Water surged around the boat, exploding upward like a blast. The vessel rocked wildly, tossing the boys to the deck. In terror, Black Cap Boy shouted, asking what on earth that could be. From the sea rose a massive form, resembling a dragon, soaring into the sky. Later, back in the city, People went about their daily routines as a massive LCD screen on a building wall displayed breaking news. The broadcast reported that a waterspout had been observed offshore in Jeju that afternoon. Footage showed a towering, dragon-like shape, and the phenomenon was described as a dragon ascent, due to its appearance. While experts explained that waterspouts form because of interacting air currents and occur several times a year around Jeju, eyewitnesses insisted this one was different. Black Cat Boy appeared on the news, declaring with conviction that what he saw was not a natural phenomenon but a real dragon. A meteorological officer, Lee Jong-ho, explained that such sightings were often misinterpretations, much like in ancient times when people believed waterspouts were immediately ascending to the heavens after accumulating virtue for 100 years. Historical records from the annals of King Sejong even mentioned 5 dragons rising into the sky over Jeju. He concluded that fear and lack of experience could easily lead witnesses to believe they had seen something divine. That night, under a pale moon, Habaek descended silently onto the roof of a house. Gazing toward the light, he whispered a single name, Soah. He spoke of her as the woman he loved more than anyone else in the world, his one and only bride. With quiet determination, he vowed that no matter how long it took, he would find her again. Soah found herself standing atop the surface of water, as though the laws of reality no longer applied. Looking around in confusion, she wondered where this place was and whether she had slipped into another dream. Slowly, she lowered one foot, expecting it to sink, yet the water merely rippled beneath her touch. Ahead, a solitary door stood upright, seemingly floating in the air. Drawn by an inexplicable pull, she walked toward it and gently pushed it open. Beyond the door lay an immense sight, a colossal white dragon coiled around a massive slab of stone, its body enveloping it protectively. Soft light filled the space, and butterflies drifted lazily through the air, their wings glowing faintly. She stepped forward, realizing she had entered a palace unlike anything she had ever seen. Though she was certain this place was unfamiliar, it felt strangely intimate, as if it belonged to her memories. She moved deeper inside, her gaze catching on delicate makeup tools arranged neatly on a table. Nearby stood a young woman being prepared by her maids, who were styling her hair and applying cosmetics with practiced care. Watching silently, she realized something unsettling: none of them could see her. As she drew closer, her breath caught in her throat. The woman before her was unmistakably herself. Startled, she raised a hand to cover half her face, whispering that it was her face, yet not truly her. A wave of unease washed over her, and she squeezed her eyes shut. In an instant, another scene unfolded. She saw herself standing close to a man, their faces only inches apart. The man spoke her name, Soah, and the sound of it made her heart tremble. She reached up and cupped his cheeks, watching as his eyes filled with tears. In a broken voice, he begged her not to abandon him. Overcome with emotion, they embraced tightly. She heard herself say that if he were to die, she would die as well. Suddenly, she felt her own chest tighten. Tears streamed down her face, and she questioned why she was crying so desperately. Pressing her hands to her eyes, she murmured that it was strange her tears refused to stop. She could not understand who that man was, yet the pain in her heart felt unbearable. She demanded silently to know who he was and why he affected her so deeply. Her thoughts were abruptly interrupted by a familiar voice calling her name. Her friend Mina stood beside her, asking why she looked so dazed. Startled, Soah apologized, admitting she had not heard Mina calling. Mina studied her with concern, remarking that she had been spacing out all day and asking if she was sick. Soah shook her head and explained that she had not slept well because of a dream. Curious, Mina asked what kind of dream it was. Soah hesitated before describing it: ancient tiled roof houses from an unknown era, people dressed in old-fashioned clothing, floating rocks suspended in the sky, and gardens overflowing with flowers and butterflies. She explained that it had been so vivid it felt less like a dream and more like reality. Mina suggested that it sounded like a lucid dream. Soah agreed, explaining that a lucid dream was when someone was aware they were dreaming while still inside it. Mina then asked whether there had been anyone else in the dream. Soah replied that there were many people. Mina then asked whether there had been anyone else in the dream. Soah replied that there were many people, but none of them seemed able to see her. Among them was an extraordinarily beautiful woman whose face was exactly the same as her own. Mina reacted in shock and teased her, joking that she had never realized Soah was secretly a narcissist. Embarrassed, Soah protested loudly, insisting that she hadn't wanted to mention it and that it was hard to explain. The face was identical, yet it didn't feel like her. Suspiciously, Mina suggested that perhaps it wasn't a lucid dream at all but a memory from a past life. Soah immediately rejected the idea, pointing out that there was no historical era where rocks floated in the sky. Mina shrugged and said it would have been more interesting if it were a past life. Frustrated, Soah told her not to dismiss it so casually. She was being serious. As rain began to fall, people around them opened their umbrellas. Soah and Mina did the same. Mina complained that it seemed to be raining far too often lately, even though it wasn't the rainy season yet. She grumbled about how her shoes always got soaked and uncomfortable. Soah, however, admitted that she liked the rain. Then she paused, wondering aloud why the image of that woman always came to her mind whenever it rained. Mina teased her again, asking whether there was anything else in the dream besides the woman who looked like her. After a moment's hesitation, Soah mentioned that there had been a man standing beside the woman. Mina's eyes immediately lit up with curiosity, as she adjusted her glasses and asked eagerly whether he was handsome. Soah scolded her, asking why her eyes only sparkled whenever a man was involved. At that moment, as Soah stepped forward, she suddenly felt as if someone had shoved her from behind. Losing her balance, she stumbled into the road just as a car sped toward her on a green light. Mina screamed her name in terror. The car swerved sharply, stopping just in time. Shaken voices filled the air as people rushed over, asking whether she was all right and scolding her for running into the street. A brown-haired girl approached, asking what had happened, while a teacher hurried over, checking anxiously to see if Soah was injured. As she stood there trembling, Soah wondered whether it had all been her imagination. Yet the sensation had been too real. It truly felt as though someone had pushed her. Somewhere unseen, the bride had found her. The bride Habaek. Mina clutched Soah's arm, asking repeatedly whether she was hurt. Soah reassured her that she wasn't injured, though her legs felt too weak to support her. She apologized quietly, still shaken. Unbeknownst to her, dangerous eyes were watching. At school, Mina noticed the bandages wrapped around Soah's legs and froze in shock. She stared at her in disbelief and exclaimed that Soah had insisted she wasn't hurt the day before. Anxiously, she demanded to know what had happened. Soah brushed it off lightly, explaining that it was only a small scrape and a bruise, nothing serious at all. She added that it didn't hurt anymore. Unable to hold back her emotions, Mina burst into tears and hugged her tightly, asking over and over if she was truly sure. Soah gently patted her back, telling her not to cry and reassuring her that she was really fine. Mina then asked whether Soah had told her parents about the accident, and what their reaction had been. Soah admitted that she had only said she fell by herself because she didn't want to worry them. Even so, her mother had scolded her severely for not being careful. Adjusting her glasses, Mina frowned and asked whether she shouldn't tell them the truth. Soah sighed, holding her head, and explained that if her parents knew the full story, they would never have let her come to school. Ever since she was little, she had been injured in strange ways far too often, and even minor wounds made her parents overreact. Just then, a Miho approached and asked Soah what had happened to her hand, clearly concerned. She repeated that it was nothing and that she had simply fallen. He looked unconvinced and asked whether she was really okay, remarking that it looked painful. He suggested she rest in the nurse's office. Soah smiled and reassured him once again that she was fine. She told him that if it started to hurt, she would say something. He nodded and thanked her, then hesitated before saying that he had something he wanted to talk to her about. He asked whether she wanted to go home together later. She agreed without much thought. Turning to Mina, he asked whether she would be coming with them as well and suggested they meet after class. Soah said goodbye, promising to see them later. As soon as he left, Soah turned to Mina and asked what she thought he wanted to say. Mina smirked knowingly and claimed she already knew. When Soah questioned how she could possibly know, Mina confidently declared that she believed Miho was planning to confess to her that day. Soah reacted in shock, making an embarrassed expression and asking why Miho would confess to her. Mina replied that there was no other reason. It was obvious he liked her. Soah denied it immediately, insisting that Miho only cared because they were friends. Mina simply smiled and told her to wait and see, convinced she was right. Nearby, students whispered among themselves. A black-haired boy and a brown-haired girl gossiped quietly, the girl remarking that anyone who caught Han Miho's attention was incredibly lucky. She listed his charms: his height, good looks, popularity, and kind personality. Later, Mina leaned close to Soah and teasingly told her that she would step aside when they went home, so Soah should do her best. Confused and flustered, Soah asked what exactly she was supposed to do well at. After school, Soah walked home with Miho while checking her phone. He asked why Mina wasn't with them, noting that the two of them always went home together. Soah explained that Mina had said she needed to stop somewhere first, and had gone ahead. Gathering his courage, Miho then asked what she was doing after exams. He suggested going to the amusement park together. Soah repeated the words in disbelief, immediately suspecting Mina's involvement. Still stunned, she agreed. Miho smiled brightly and said they could match schedules with the others. When she asked who else was coming, he explained that Jaiwoo and Heyman had already agreed, and a few more friends were checking their availability. He then asked her to confirm with Mina the next day. Soah agreed. Almost immediately, a message from Mina popped up on her phone, asking if things were going well and proudly claiming credit if everything worked out. Embarrassed beyond measure, Soah typed back that Mina would pay for this tomorrow. Her face burned with shame. Miho noticed her expression and asked what was wrong. Trying to change the subject, Soah pointed ahead and asked whether the person over there didn't look strange. A figure stood nearby, dressed in heavy clothing despite the intense heat. Soah commented that anyone wearing such long garments in weather like this must be burning up. Suddenly, a girl's voice spoke her name, declaring that today was her lucky day because she had finally found her. Shocked, Soah wondered how the stranger knew her name and, more disturbingly, whether the being in front of her was even human. She noticed snakes coiling and writhing around the girl. The stranger demanded that Soah hand over the power of the bando she possessed. At her command, the snakes opened their mouths and slithered forward menacingly. Terror seized Soah, freezing her in place. Miho shouted for her to move, but she couldn't. In a split second, Miho rushed forward, pulling her out of the snake's path. He was struck in the struggle, falling to the ground unconscious. Soah collapsed beside him, clutching him desperately and begging him to wake up. One of the snakes wrapped its tail around him, its jaws opening wide. Overwhelmed, Soah wondered if she was dreaming again. There was no way something like this could be real. Tears streamed down her face as water splashed violently around them. A masked figure appeared, watching intently, and muttered that this power must be real. The snake woman snarled in frustration, unable to believe that the power of the bando was right in front of her yet beyond her grasp. Suddenly, the snakes withdrew, releasing their hold. Soah was flung backward, falling through the air before crashing into the water below. Darkness swallowed her consciousness. As she floated helplessly, the masked man caught her gently in his arms. Holding her close, he whispered with unwavering certainty that he had told her before no matter what, he would find her again. She suddenly regained consciousness, and weakly asked who was there. Before anyone could answer, her vision blurred again, and she slipped back into unconsciousness. At that moment, a powerful presence descended. The white dragon appeared, its massive form cutting through the air. Slowly, the dragon transformed into a man. Taeyul Jinin stood facing Habaek, his expression grave. He remarked that Habaek had finally found her, and questioned what he intended to do next. With a sharp tone, he warned him not to say that he planned to take her back to the Water Kingdom like this. Habaek replied calmly that no one could say for sure. Taeyul Jinin sighed, explaining that his concern came from fear that Habaek would forget reality. He reminded him firmly that she was no longer the woman he once loved. That woman belonged to the past. This girl was an ordinary human, not the bride of a water god. If Habaek interfered in her life now, he would only plunge her into chaos. Habaek acknowledged the truth with quiet bitterness, stating that love between a human who could not live even 100 years and a god who lived for eternity had been doomed from the very beginning. He added that the world had changed. This land was no longer what it once was. Humans no longer believed in gods. Taeyul Jinin replied that one of the beings standing before them had once been worshipped as a god by the humans of this land. In the beginning, he had been nothing more than a lowly creature, but sincere prayers and genuine faith had granted him power. Born from that faith, he had grown strong and protected the land. However, as humans slowly lost their faith and stopped remembering him, he transformed from a god into a Dryaxini. Taeyul Jinin recalled how the creature had once questioned where everyone had gone, and why no one worshipped him anymore. Perhaps, he suggested, the being had always been a Sini, and humans had simply elevated him into a god through belief. Faith alone was powerful enough to turn a Sini into a god. But now, humans no longer needed gods. The few remaining gods had abandoned humanity and returned to the divine realm. Habaek concluded that they could not remain there much longer, and that a decision had to be made quickly. Soon after, Soah slowly opened her eyes. Miho was at her side, immediately asking whether she was awake and if she was feeling all right. Confused, she asked where they were, and he told her they were in the hospital. When she asked why she was there, Miho gently reminded her of the accident. Shocked, she repeated the word, accident, and he explained that something had attacked them while they were on their way home. She recalled seeing Miho collapse and anxiously asked what had happened afterward, immediately checking whether he was hurt. Miho reassured her that he was fine, suffering only a few minor scrapes. He explained that the doctors had said he could go home that day, which she found hard to believe given how much he had been bleeding. According to witnesses, there had been an explosion caused by a construction crew accidentally hitting a city gas pipe near the bus stop. Fortunately, no one had been seriously injured or killed. When she asked if everyone believed it was just a gas explosion, Miho nodded and said the doctor had told him that she had not been injured, only unconscious. They would run a few more tests, and she would likely be discharged soon. Soah felt unsettled and asked what that meant for everything she had seen. Was none of it real? Miho gently told her to rest and said he would come back the next day. He mentioned that her mother was speaking with the doctor and would return shortly. Soah thanked him, and Miho smiled, saying he was relieved that neither of them had been seriously hurt. He reminded her of their promise to go to the amusement park and told her to get better quickly so they could go together. She smiled softly and agreed. He admitted he was grateful that the part where she got hurt hadn't truly happened. That night, as Soah slept, her mother anxiously asked the doctor whether her daughter's high fever was dangerous. The doctor reassured her that the CT scan showed no abnormalities and that there were no concerning findings. She had been given a fever reducer and would recover soon. After her mother left, Soah remained alone in the hospital room, sleeping quietly. Unseen by human eyes, Habaek stood beside her bed. He gently placed his hand near hers and leaned closer, gazing at her face. He murmured that even after 1,000 years, he remembered her face, her voice, and every small gesture as clearly as ever. Lifting her chin slightly, he whispered that her face and voice were exactly the same, yet everyone insisted she was no longer his Soah. He wondered what he was supposed to do with these feelings. Soah stirred faintly and murmured that it hurt, that her body felt unbearably hot. Habaek cupped her face, drawing closer, and she sighed softly, saying it felt cooler now, as though she had slipped into cold water. The touch was gentle and familiar. Half conscious, she whispered his name. Nearby, Taeyeoljin watched while smoking calmly. He remarked that it seemed Habaek would not be returning to the Water Kingdom anytime soon. He asked whether Habaek truly intended to stay beside a woman who did not even remember him. Holding Soah carefully in his arms, Habaek replied that it did not matter. There was still plenty of time. After all, he had already waited 1,000 years. Soah found herself drifting once more into a dream. Soft laughter surrounded her. One young woman gently touched her hair and praised how silky it felt, calling her Lady Soah, with affectionate reverence. Another girl chimed in, saying that if she applied Hyangtek, her hair would shine even more beautifully. She held up an ivory hairpin, explaining that when it was worn, the beads would sway lightly and produce a clear, lovely sound with every step. Yet another voice spoke warmly, admiring the yanji made from safflower blossoms, gathered only from the most exquisite blooms. Together, they assured her that she looked truly stunning and that Lord Habaek would surely love the sight of her. Habaek and Soah were seated together in a small boat drifting quietly across the water. The night air was calm, the surface of the river reflecting the sky like glass. Habaek spoke with faint regret, remarking that it was a shame they had missed the falling stars. Then, with mild amusement, he asked why women always seemed to take so long to get ready. Soah replied softly that it had been a long time since she had gone out like this. She simply wanted to look pretty. Hearing this, Habaek reached for her hand and held it firmly yet gently. With honesty in his voice, he admitted that the real reason he had called her was because he wanted to give her something. From his sleeve, he produced a hairpin and placed it in her hand. Confused and touched, Soah asked why he was giving it to her, especially when he knew she did not care much for adornments. Habaek smiled and pointed to the knot woven at its center, explaining that it was called a Dongshimjayol knot. When Soah murmured that Dongshimjayol symbolized an eternal heart, he did not deny it. Instead, he leaned forward and placed a gentle kiss upon her lips. Later, before the god of matrimony, Habaek prayed earnestly, repeating his wish again and again. He did not pray as a god bound by divine law, nor as a human limited by fate, but simply as a man standing beside a woman he loved. With quiet devotion, he asked that they be allowed to love one another for a long, long time. The sound of an alarm shattered the dream. At 6:30 a.m., Soah woke abruptly, her heart racing. Desperation washed over her, as she muttered to herself that she had seen that dream again. She stumbled into the bathroom, turned on the tap, and splashed cold water over her face. When she looked up into the mirror, her reflection felt strangely unfamiliar. She whispered that she seemed to be dreaming more and more often. She thought she had grown used to it, But this dream had been different from the others. Until now, it had always felt as though she were merely watching from the outside, like a distant observer. This time, however, everything had felt vivid and real, as if she had truly been there. The realization made her cheeks burn with embarrassment. In the dream, she had called that man by name Habaek. Habaek was the name of the water god. That realization unsettled her deeply. If so, did that mean the man appearing in her dreams was a water deity? Later that day, in the school library, a black-haired boy sat quietly, writing something in his notebook. Nearby, Soah searched through the shelves. Her fingers paused when she pulled out an orange-colored book with a snake illustrated on its cover. She opened it and began to read. The book contained passages about Habaek, the water god who governed all waters. It described how he appeared in the Goguryeo founding myth as the maternal grandfather of Jemung, the founding king of Goguryeo. According to the text, Habaek had 3 beautiful daughters, the eldest, Yuah, the second, Manhwa, and the youngest, Waiwa. Their names, the book noted, were derived from flowers that bloomed by the water. The story grew darker as it recounted how Yuah, Habaek's first daughter, had secretly been involved with Mosu, the son of the heavenly emperor. When she was abandoned, Habaek cast her out into the human realm for staining the family's honor. Exiled among humans, Yuah later gave birth to an egg. From that egg was born Jemung, who would go on to found Goguryeo. After reading several books, Soah felt unexpectedly upset. There was far less information than she had anticipated. She had always believed she knew Habaek well simply because the name was familiar, yet now she realized she knew almost nothing about him. She began sketching out a rough family pedigree of Habaek. While Yuah was famous, it was her first time encountering the names of the other 2 daughters. Her thoughts were interrupted when Mina approached, irritation clear on her face. Mina complained that if Soah was going to the library, she should have gone together with her. Glancing at the book, Mina asked why Soah was reading Goguryeo mythology when it was not even part of the exam. After some hesitation, Soah told her the truth. Mina froze in shock, then asked incredulously whether the man in Soah's dream was Habaek. Soah admitted that she did not know if it was truly the same Habaek of myth, but in her dream, that was the name she had called him. She explained that she had tried to dismiss it as nothing more than a dream, yet it kept recurring with increasing frequency. That was why she had decided to look into Habaek more seriously. Mina crossed her arms and summarized the situation bluntly, saying that, in other words, Soah was Habaek's lover in her dream. Then she added teasingly that since Habaek was Jemung's grandfather, did that not make him a grandpa? Offended, Soah snapped back that he was not a grandpa at all and insisted that he was ridiculously handsome. Mina was unconvinced. She argued that even if he was not a grandfather, he was still a married man with daughters, and she was not about to let her friend date a married guy even if it was in a dream. Flustered, Soah told her to calm down, reminding her that none of it was real. Curious, Mina asked what had happened in the dream the night before. Hesitantly, Soah admitted that Habaek had given her an ornament woven with knots, and had explained that the Dongshim Gyeol knot symbolized an eternal heart. She added, in a much quieter voice, that he had leaned closer and closer. Mina's eyes widened in shock as she demanded to know what happened next. When Soah confessed that they had kissed, Mina nearly shouted in amazement. Mortified, Soah begged her to keep her voice down, saying she was dying of embarrassment. Mina, however, claimed she knew exactly what kind of dream it had been. When Soah asked what she meant, Mina answered confidently that it was frustration. Soah immediately denied it. Mina only sighed and told her that she had said it before Soah needed to start dating already, which was why she kept having dreams like that. Soah insisted again that it was just a dream. Changing the subject, Mina flipped through the book and remarked that Habaek's daughters were named after flowers that bloomed near water, Yuah, Wonhwa, and Waiwa. She said she knew Yuah had younger sisters, but this was the first time she had ever seen their names written down. Thinking aloud, Mina recalled that Yuah, the daughter Habaek had cast out, was the eldest. She remembered how Lady Yuah, exiled by Habaek, had given birth to Mosu's son, Jemung, in the human realm and eventually died. Then she wondered what had happened to the other 2 daughters after that. Soah paused, realizing she had never once questioned their fate. Before she could think further, Mina snapped the book shut and announced that she had read enough. Declaring it her treat, she suggested they go to the snack bar. Relieved, Soah agreed. Far away, atop a tall building, Taeyeol-jin stood silently, gazing into the distance. She questioning whether that woman truly was the reincarnation of her mother. With a solemn expression, he greeted her unseen presence, saying that she had finally returned and that it had been a very long time. Elsewhere, Lady Waiwa watched with cold eyes. She refused to accept the truth placed before her. To her, Soa could never be her mother. Waiwa called out softly to her sister, addressing her as Sister Manhwa. Startled, Manhwa turned and asked what was wrong. At the time, Manhwa appeared to be about 15 in human years, her expression calm and composed despite her young age. Without answering immediately, Waiwa lifted a bowl filled with water. As she tilted it, the water splashed upward and then froze in midair, suspended as if time itself had stopped. With a mixture of awe and pride in her voice, she could now control water. Waiwa was Habaek's youngest daughter, who looked no more than 10 in human years. Manhwa smiled warmly and praised her, saying that she now possessed the same power as their father. She congratulated Waiwa, telling her she had done well. Waiwa beamed with happiness, but her joy was quickly replaced by curiosity. She asked where their eldest sister was, saying she wanted to show Yua what she could do. Manhwa hesitated and then suggested that they keep it a secret from their eldest sister for a while. Waiwa immediately protested and asked why they could not tell her. She insisted that she wanted to show Yua right away. Manhwa gently intervened and explained that it was better to keep it secret for now. She reminded Waiwa that Yua barely possessed any divine power. If Yua discovered that her youngest sister had awakened her abilities first, she might feel hurt. Manhwa suggested they tell Yua gradually, little by little, so she would not be wounded by the truth. Reluctantly, Waiwa agreed. Still, she asked impatiently how long she was supposed to wait. She complained that Yua was the only one among them who had yet to awaken divine power. If Yua had awakened sooner, Waiwa thought bitterly, she could have boasted proudly in front of her. Later, Waiwa wandered near a doorway and overheard several young women whispering among themselves. One of them mentioned Yua's name, saying she had heard rumors that Lady Yua had no divine power at all. She added that although everyone tried to cover it up, it was the truth. Another voice remarked that it was only natural, given that lowly human blood was mixed into her lineage. Confused, another girl asked what she meant by human blood. The first replied in hushed tones, questioning whether Lady Yua's mother, Lady Soah, had been human. She explained that although Lady Soah had consumed a heavenly peach and stopped aging, gaining eternal life on the surface, a person's nature could never truly be changed. Someone else added that Yua was a child born between a human and a god. Hidden nearby, Waiwa listened in shock. She asked herself whether that meant Yua was either fully god nor fully human. Her heart pounded as despair and anger welled up inside her. She whispered fiercely that it was a disgrace to the divine realm. Tears streamed down her face as she cried out that it was not true. She was not the child of a mere human, she was the daughter of the water god. Elsewhere, Soa lay still, her eyes closed as if asleep. Waiwa rushed to her side and called out to her, addressing her as Mother, begging her to wake up. Growing frantic, she shouted that something was wrong and demanded to know why her mother would not open her eyes. One who arrived behind her and spoke quietly, telling Waiwa that their mother had passed away. Waiwa froze, unable to comprehend the words. She asked what it meant for someone to die and then broke down, crying as she asked if she would never be able to see her mother again. Habaek gathered Waiwa into his arms, holding her tightly. Through her tears, Waiwa asked whether her mother had truly been human. At that moment, Habaek declared that Yua's divine status was revoked. His voice was cold and absolute as he commanded that from that moment onward, no one in the Water Kingdom was permitted to speak Yua's name. He shouted that anyone who violated this order would be severely punished without exception. Consumed by rage and grief, Waiwa turned and ran. Manhwa shouted after her, telling her to stop, but Waiwa ignored her. She cried out that she was going to the human world to bring Sister Yua back. Manhwa tried to stop her, warning that if their father found out, Waiwa would be punished as well. Waiwa screamed back that Habaek was only angry for now, insisting that once Yua returned, he would surely forgive her. Manhwa replied solemnly that Yua had chosen to live as a human. Hearing this, Waiwa became hysterical, declaring that such a thing was impossible. She insisted that humans must have tricked her sister. Covering her eyes with her hands, she sobbed that if Yua had not been deceived, there was no way she would have abandoned her family to choose humans. Her voice trembled with hatred as she blamed humans yet again, saying they always took everything from her. She declared that she hated them. Later, Waiwa spoke coldly to Taeyeoljin, stating that someone like Soa could never be her mother. She asserted that she herself was the daughter of the water god and that her true mother had died thousands of years ago. She added that although gods might live forever, they never reincarnated, only humans were reborn through reincarnation. In her eyes, the girl who had been born again was nothing more than a human child who happened to resemble her mother. She insisted that a mere human girl could never be her mother. Taeyeol-jin replied calmly that even so, the fact remained that Soah was her mother's reincarnation. He then asked whether Lord Habaek, her father, knew how she truly felt about this matter. Hwa narrowed her eyes and accused him of trying to threaten her by telling her father. She said he would not dare to do such a thing. Then she demanded to know why he had brought Soah all the way there, knowing she would never accept a human girl as her mother. Taeyeol-jin smiled faintly and remarked that, as expected, Lady Hwa was not easily deceived. Hwa responded sharply that she had long despised how she could never tell what he was truly thinking behind his smiles. She acknowledged his status an immortal sage, the king of the 5 clans, the Eastern Blue Dragon, and demanded to know what he wanted from her. At last, Taeyeol-jin answered honestly. He said that he wanted her to kill Soah to kill that human girl in his place. Hwa reacted sharply, questioning how he could say such things while still serving her father as his master. With suspicion clear in her voice, she asked whether the Olga clan was planning to betray the water god. Taeyeol-jin merely smiled and replied calmly that such a thing would never happen. From the very first day the master-servant contract had been formed, Habaek alone had been his master. The fate of his clan and even his own life were all staked on Habaek. He revealed that he was the Azure Dragon of the East, the great king Chenyangdyanggyak, and that it was by his own will that he had allowed the water god Habaek to become his master. He explained that this decision had not been made because Habaek was weaker than him. In fact, the power of the Dragon Kings far surpassed that of the gods within the divine realm. However, the dragon race possessed a single, fatal weakness. While gods were granted endless life, the lifespan of dragons was finite, no different from that of humans. There was only one way for dragons to obtain eternal life: they had to find a god who shared the same attribute, form a master-servant contract, and share that god's lifespan. Finding such a compatible partner was so rare that it might occur only once in hundreds of millions of eons. But once the contract was formed, their lives became inseparably linked. By entering into a contract with Habaek, Taeyeol-jin gained eternal life, but if Habaek were to die, he would perish as well. He continued by saying that the human world was already far too polluted. The longer a god remained there, the weaker their power became. Yet as long as that reincarnated woman existed in the human world, Habaek would never leave it. Hwa coldly remarked that one day, Soah would inevitably become Habaek's weakness and place him in grave danger. Taeyeol-jin replied without hesitation that regardless of the circumstances, he would not tolerate anything that endangered Habaek. Hwa said she understood perfectly how desperately he wanted Soah dead. Still, she questioned whether it truly required the involvement of 2 gods to kill a single human woman. If he was so eager to eliminate her, she argued, he could simply do it himself instead of asking her. He admitted that he wished more than anything to do exactly that. Unfortunately, because of the contract, he could not disobey Habaek's orders. Habaek had commanded him to protect Soah, and therefore, he could not kill her with his own hands. After observing Hwa for a long time, he added that she seemed to hate Soah just as much as he did. If that were true, then he wanted to help her. He asked quietly whether he was mistaken. Hwa scoffed, saying that calling her out of nowhere to make such a request took a great deal of nerve. She stated plainly that she did not trust him. She had heard that long ago, during the battle against Emperor Xianyuan, he had stood aside for a long time without choosing any side. Someone like that, she said, was not worthy of her trust. She did not need his cooperation. She was going to do it anyway and simply preferred that he not interfere. Her words caught his attention. He asked if she truly intended to do it regardless. Now he was curious. He explained that he was acting for the sake of his own life, but what reason did she have to want Soah dead? Human lifespans did not even reach 100 years. To a god who lived for eternity, such a span was nothing more than a fleeting moment. She could simply wait for Soah to live out her life and die naturally. He asked her directly whether she truly had a reason to kill her with her own hands. Hwa answered without hesitation. She said that the woman carried the scent of peach. That scent was proof that Yua had been born carrying the power of the bando peach she had eaten in her past life. That peach had been the last fruit from the final bando tree, the very tree Yua had saved by pouring all of her strength into it. Hwa declared that she could not allow a mere human to possess the power of bando. She would kill that human woman and take the power for herself. Later, Soah was sitting on a bus when her phone buzzed with a message from Mina. Mina excitedly asked her to guess what she had found. She claimed she had discovered a real-life photo of Habaek and said she would send it immediately. Moments later, a picture of a completely different man appeared on the screen. Mina laughed and said that he was really handsome, just like the one in Soah's dreams. Soah felt irritation surge through her and muttered that she would not let Mina get away with this. She regretted ever bragging to her, and decided that she would never share anything like that again. As the bus reached her stop, she got off and stepped forward. After taking just 3 steps, she noticed an elderly woman standing nearby. Suddenly, the old woman lost her balance and fell. Soah rushed to her side, helped her up, and asked gently whether she could stand. Taking the woman's hand, she helped her steady herself. The old woman thanked her warmly. Soah asked where she was headed and offered to walk her there. The old woman replied that it was all right to wait there, as her daughter would come to pick her up. Soah said she would stay with her until her daughter arrived. The old woman smiled and praised her, calling her a pretty and kind young lady. She thanked her again, and then slowly closed her eyes. Worried, Soah asked whether she was feeling unwell. Suddenly, a passerby looked at Soah and asked if she had 3 daughters. Startled, Soah immediately denied it, saying she was still a student. She did not even have a boyfriend, let alone daughters. The person insisted that they could clearly see 3 daughters. Feeling flustered, Soah wondered aloud whether she really looked that old. Just then, a woman hurried over and called out to the old lady, addressing her as Mom. She scolded her gently for wandering off and asked what she was doing there, explaining that she had been searching everywhere for her. Soah stepped back politely and said she was glad the woman's daughter had arrived. She told them she would be leaving now. The daughter thanked Soah sincerely for staying with her mother, and then asked hesitantly whether her mother had said anything strange. Soah asked what she meant. The woman explained that when her mother was younger, she had been a Dangol, a shaman famous throughout their village. She had been forced to stop because of dementia. On clear days, she was perfectly normal, but on bad days, she said strange things to people. If she had said anything odd, she asked Soah to understand that it was because of her illness and apologized. Soah reassured her that it was all right and said the old woman had not said anything unusual. She wished them well, telling them to take care on their way home and to stay healthy. The woman thanked her again. As Soah walked forward, the old lady suddenly reached out and grasped her hand. Startled, Soah asked what was wrong and whether she had forgotten something. The old woman leaned closer and warned her to be careful. She quietly reminded herself not to panic. Her daughter gently explained to the others that her mother suffered from dementia and likely had not meant anything by her strange words. Still, a chilling thought crossed her mind. Hadn't the old woman once been a Dangol, a shaman renowned in her youth for being the genuine article? Fear crept into Soah's heart. With trembling eyes, she asked her grandmother whether it was truly her fate to die by her own daughter's hand. The old woman only smiled warmly and spoke as if changing the subject, remarking that such a pretty girl must be hungry. Soah hesitated and called out softly, "Grandma?" Another woman quickly apologized on her behalf, explaining that there was nothing to worry about. Soah reassured her, saying it was all right and that her grandmother was fine. The woman then turned to her mother, gently urging her to stop getting distracted and to head home carefully. Suddenly, the old woman's gaze sharpened as if she had sensed something unseen. She murmured the words, "Dragon King." Her voice filled with awe, and wondered aloud how someone so noble could come all the way to the human realm. The woman beside her sighed in frustration, asking what it was this time. Nearby, a passerby shouted angrily, asking whether the woman wanted to die by standing there like that. The daughter immediately bowed her head in apology, explaining that her mother had dementia and was not in her right state of mind. Placing a protective hand on her mother's shoulder, she urged her gently, saying it was dangerous and that they needed to leave quickly. From above, standing atop a traffic light pole, Taeyul Jinan observed everything in silence. He recognized it instantly. She was a shaman, a bridge between gods and humans. The realization intrigued him. To think that a shaman with such power still existed in this land stirred his curiosity. Later that day, the atmosphere shifted completely. An amusement park buzzed with laughter and excitement. Girls screamed joyfully as they rode the swinging horses, while crowds filled the walkways, enjoying the day. Miho snapped photos as memories were made. Soah walked beside them, holding an ice cream, while Mina laughed at her side. Soah and Miho sat together on the horse swing ride, smiling as it lifted into the air. Miho's friends joined them at the park, striking playful poses beside him and joking around. Miho excitedly suggested that they all ride the Viking next. One of his friends complained about being hungry and suggested eating first. Mina turned to Soah with a curious smile and asked how she had managed to convince her mother to let her come. Soah grew emotional and told her not to ask. She explained that it had taken days of arguing, and even then, Her mother had continued to warn her nonstop, telling her to watch for cars and stay away from water. It felt suffocating, as if she was still a little child. Mina gently pointed out that with so many recent accidents happening one after another, her mother's worry was understandable. Soah admitted she knew that was true. Mina reassured her, promising that if anything happened, she would protect her. Soah laughed lightly, calling her reliable and saying she would trust her. As they wandered further, Soah stopped near a crane game, her eyes lighting up as she called it adorable. Miho asked if she wanted him to win something for her, and asked which one she liked. She insisted it was fine and said she was only looking, but Miho confidently claimed he was great at it. He asked again, offering to win the biggest prize there. This time, she smiled and pointed out the pink bear in the middle. Miho told her to wait right there, and promised to win it quickly. As he prepared, she added that it didn't have to be the pink bear, the bunny beside it would be fine too. In the end, Miho managed to grab a panda keychain instead. Apologizing shyly, he handed it to her. Soah smiled brightly and thanked him, saying it was cute and that she really liked it. Her laughter rang softly. From a distance, Habaek watched everything unfold. His expression darkened as he thought Taeyeol-jin in talk that this was no longer the woman Habaek once loved. If Habaek were to step into her life now, it would only plunge her into chaos. Mina soon messaged Soah, telling her that the others were already lined up for the Viking ride and wanted them to come over. He reached out, took her hand, and urged her to hurry. She nodded and agreed. At that moment, Habaek's anger surged. A dangerous thought crossed his mind: should he kill him? The sky responded to his fury, as lightning crackled violently above. People around them froze in fear, confused by the sudden storm. Someone shouted, wondering how lightning could strike from a clear sky when the forecast had promised fair weather. Habaek clenched the staff in his hand. In an instant, a large board from the amusement park snapped loose and came crashing down near Soah. She gasped in shock as water splashed over her, soaking her completely. Miho screamed her name in panic. Before anything else could happen, Habaek stepped forward, positioning himself directly in front of Soah, shielding her from further harm. Drenched and trembling, Soah looked up at him in disbelief and softly called out his name, Habaek. Soah's mind drifted back to her dream, the memory overlapping uneasily with reality. Miho noticed her distant expression and asked anxiously whether she was all right. Around them, voices rose in panic as people shouted in confusion, asking what had just happened. Someone cried out in alarm, urging another to call 911. A black-haired woman pushed through the crowd, loudly telling someone named Safi to contact emergency services immediately. A boy complained angrily, questioning how something like that could fall and criticizing the park's management. Others wondered aloud where all the sudden water had come from. Miho stepped closer and extended his hand towards Soah, asking gently whether she could stand. She accepted his help, thanked him, and then asked where he had gone. Miho looked puzzled and asked who she was talking about. She clarified that she meant the man who had been standing right in front of her moments ago. Miho stared at her in disbelief, and said he had not seen anyone at all. Shocked, Soah asked again if he was certain. When he confirmed that there had been no one there, her heart sank. She wondered if that meant what she had seen was not real after all. Later, at the hospital's emergency medical center, Mina clutched Soah tightly and burst into tears, apologizing over and over. She said she was sorry because she had promised to protect her. Soah tried to reassure her, telling her not to cry and insisting that it had only been an accident. Soah's mother arrived shortly after, pale with fear. She shouted Soah's name and rushed to her side, asking urgently what had happened and whether she was hurt. Soah quickly explained that it was nothing serious. Her mother's fear turned into anger as she scolded her, saying that Miho had told her on the way that it had almost turned into a disaster. Furious, she said this was exactly why she had warned Soah not to go out, yet Soah had not listened. Soah repeated that she was really fine and pointed out that she was perfectly okay. Her mother turned to Mina and asked her to explain exactly what had happened. Hesitantly, Mina said that a sign had fallen and almost hit Soah on the head. At those words, Soah's mother trembled and clutched her own head, whispering in shock. Soah quickly tried to calm her, saying again that she had not been hurt. She explained that the doctors had already run all the tests and found nothing wrong. Embarrassed, she apologized for worrying everyone. Her mother's anger melted away, and she cupped Soah's face gently, saying that nothing else mattered as long as she was not hurt. Inside, Soah knew she could never tell her mother about the man she had seen or about the dreams. If she did, her mother would only worry even more. Elsewhere, Habaek reflected that he had placed a protective barrier around Soah, and that she should be safe for the time being. He thought about her again, remembering clearly how she had called his name. That moment replayed vividly in his mind. When she had spoken it, he had nearly lost control, rushing toward her and pulling her into his arms without a second thought. He wondered if her memories from her past life were beginning to return. Turning his thoughts elsewhere, Habaek summoned a crow using a lock of its feathers. He questioned who the one was who had attacked Soah. Whoever it was had carried a strong hostility toward her. From that presence, he had sensed a faint yet familiar energy. His expression darkened as a possibility crossed his mind: his daughter. He dismissed it immediately, telling himself it was impossible. There was no way that child could be in the human world now. That night, the crow flew through the dark sky and landed on a building terrace. There, Ahwan knelt down and bowed his head deeply, apologizing to Lady Waiwa. He admitted that he had failed and that the mistake was his. He had underestimated the woman, thinking she was nothing more than a human. Waiwa replied calmly that it could not be helped, since their father had intervened. She added that not even he could defeat their father. She lifted his face and ordered him to stand. Then she said coldly that as long as their father stayed by that woman's side, it would be difficult to get close to her. They could not win through force, she concluded, so they would have to change their approach. Her plan was clear: they needed to separate that woman from their father. All she had to do was ensure that he had no choice but to return to the Water Kingdom. Juan returned alone to his residence, a sword clenched tightly in his hand. Upon entering, he placed the blade carefully on the sofa before removing his outer garments. As the fabric fell away, numerous marks and wounds were revealed across his body, evidence of past battles and punishments he had endured. Elsewhere, a servant anxiously followed Lady Waiwa through a forbidden path, warning her that it was dangerous to venture so far from the palace. The servant urged her to return at once, reminding her that this place was strictly forbidden by Lord Habaek himself. If they were discovered here, both of them would face severe punishment without exception. Ahead of them, bound tightly to a tree, was a man covered in blood. His eyes were concealed behind a mask, and thick ropes restrained his body. Lady Waiwa's gaze fell upon him, but the servant quickly tried to stop her from looking. The servant explained that the Celestials had been hunting down a sinner, and assumed that this man must have died while attempting to flee. Just then, the man's fingers twitched slightly. Lady Waiwa noticed the movement immediately, and declared that he was still alive. The servant gasped in disbelief, wondering how anyone could survive wounds so severe. She insisted on calling the soldiers to dispose of him properly, believing that leaving him alive was dangerous. Lady Waiwa refused. She ordered that the man be taken back to the palace instead. Calmly but firmly, she stated that she would save him and that she would make him hers. The servant cried out in alarm, begging her to reconsider. She reminded Lady Waiwa of the past, of how her sister, Lady Yuwa, had been banished to the human realm because of her involvement with a Celestial. Bringing a Celestial into the palace while Lord Habaek was away from the Water Kingdom was unforgivable. If Habaek were to find out, the servant warned, he would never forgive her, not even Lady Waiwa herself. Lady Waiwa turned sharply and asked the servant who her master truly was. When the servant hesitated, Waiwa answered for her, declaring that her master was not Habaek, but herself. She coldly asked whether the servant wished to die. Terrified, the servant immediately bowed her head, admitting her mistake and begging for forgiveness. The injured Celestial was later brought into the palace, his entire body wrapped in bandages. As he regained consciousness, he groaned in pain, clutching his head as a sharp headache struck him. Disoriented, he asked where he was and who he was. The guards ordered him to bow his head and show proper respect, telling him that the one standing before him was the woman who had saved the life of a lowly gamigo like him. Lady Waiwa stepped forward and said she had heard that he did not remember anything. Hearing her voice, the Celestial paused. He remarked that she sounded very young. Lady Waiwa calmly introduced herself as Waiwa, the third daughter of the water god, Habaek. At the sound of her name, the man repeated it softly and asked whether it meant reed flower. She confirmed it, and then declared that since she had picked him up and saved his life, he now belonged to her. From that moment on, she said, his name would be Juan. The man bowed his head deeply in submission. Lady Waiwa reminded him once more that she was his master now and that her name was Waiwa.